Hey, welcome back. It is wonderful to see all of your smiling faces again. Today, we're going to talk about contrast in a slightly different way. We've talked about contrast a lot in the past. Contrast is when you have two parts of your picture that are right next to each other, but they're very different from each other, and so it makes one of those things pop out! Not just, pop out a little bit, but really pop out! Right? That's the whole point of contrast. Well, contrast works in a lot of different ways in our pictures, and the way that we're going to use it today has to do with how close together our lines are or how far apart our lines are. Because when our lines get closer together, it's going to make an area look darker. And then when our lines get farther apart, it's going to make that area look lighter. Here's what I mean. Now, this paper has a little bit of schmutz on it. It's just a practice paper. You're going to need two papers today. One's going to be a practice paper, and then the other one we're actually going to draw a big drawing on. I'm using a Sharpie. You can use any material that's black. So it could be a black marker, black pen, but something super dark black. A regular pencil will do if that's all that you have, but just remember that a pencil doesn't get completely black. It's kind of gray, not black. So it would be better to use a pen or a marker, especially if you have a permanent marker or one with a really broad tip, because we're going to be making some thick lines. Now here on my practice paper, my first paper, I'm just going to start by making a couple of boxes. And let's make four boxes and label them 1, 2, 3, and 4. In box number 1, I'm going to put just 2 lines through that box. And you see how there's still a whole lot of white space in that box? So that box looks pretty light. If you squint your eyes and you can barely see the lines, it looks like just a white box. Box number 2, I'm going to put 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines in that box. Notice how, because those lines are closer together, there's less white space. If you kind of squint your eyes again and you look at those boxes, that second box looks a little bit darker than the first box. In box number 3, I'm going to put 10 lines. I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 go in this direction, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 go in that direction. Wow, again, if you squint your eyes a little bit and you look at that, that one looks quite a lot darker than number 2. And in box number 4, I'm going to make 20 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going the other diagonal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going vertical. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going horizontal. So that's vertical lines, 5 of them, horizontal lines, 5 of them, diagonal this way, 5 of them, diagonal this way, 5 of them. That makes a total of 20 lines. Again, if we squint our eyes and we look at this, that box number 4 looks way darker. But I didn't darken it in, I didn't color it in, it's just darker because there's less white space. So if I put box number 4 next to box number 1, will there be contrast? Let's try it out. Let's make those boxes again right next to each other, no space between them. And in box number 1, we're just making 2 lines, and in box number 4, we're making 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is there a lot of contrast between those two boxes? Yes. One of them looks very dark, one of them looks very light, and when you put the two next to each other, in this case, the dark one pops out because everything around it is light. Not just that one box, but everything around it. Okay, so that's a cool concept, that we can use more lines to make something darker, less lines to make something lighter, and we're going to use that to our advantage with a certain spiraling pattern that we're going to make. How are we going to do that? Let's jump back to our practice paper. If you've filled up one side, you can flip it over, but on our practice paper, make a bigger box this time. And we're going to make a spiral inside of this box. We're going to make it a very specific way. I'm going to pick a corner to start in. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to pick a corner to start in. And from that corner, I'm going to draw a line that is very, very close to that side of the rectangle. Notice how this makes a really tiny sliver of almost like a triangle in there, right? Okay, from that same corner, I'm going to draw a line really close to this side, and it's going to end about here. It's going to make another really tiny sliver of a triangle, right? From that corner, and you can do this without picking up your pen. From that corner, I'm going to move up to follow really close to this line, but not quite touching it. And then from this corner, I'm going to move over here, following along that line, really close, but not quite touching it. And again, without picking up, I'm going to move along really close, but not quite touching. It's making like a little tiny triangle each time. And if I keep doing that, around and around and around, really close to the line, but not touching it, really close to the line, but not touching it, really close to the line, really close to the line, really close. Notice how the corners where the lines end up meeting, where your spiral bumps into itself over and over again, those areas look darker because the lines are closer together here. There's a lot of lines coming together in this area right here. So it makes this area right here look darker. And then this area right here looks darker because there's a lot of lines coming together. But then this area here looks pretty light because those lines are kind of spread out. And this makes an interesting little spirally pattern. You can see this line right here where it spirals in on itself, right? And you can see it from this corner, from this corner, from this corner. That's a cool looking spiral. Some of you might be looking at that thinking, oh my God, how in the world did you do that? Got you covered. I'm gonna do it again. If you get it, some of you are looking at it like, yeah, I've done that before. That's totally easy, Mr. New. Then just jump ahead a little bit in the video. You don't have to watch it again if you already know how to do it. But I'm going to do it one more time with a different shape this time. Because this works with any shape at all. What if I try a triangle? I'll pick a corner to start in. Doesn't matter which one. I'll start here. I'm going to draw a line very close to this side. And it's going to come almost to this corner, but not quite. It's going to come a little bit away from that corner. So, draw a line from corner to almost corner. Without picking up my pen, I'm going to come over here to this corner. But again, not quite into the corner. It's going to be a little ways away. So, put my pen back where it came from. There. Close to the corner, but not quite in. Going close to that corner, but not quite touching it. Close to this corner but not quite touching it, and it's a spiral, so we keep going around and around and around and around and around, always going the same direction. Do I want to go back up to this one? No. If I ended here, I need to go this way because that's the way I started going. Always moving in a spiral. Now, again, like I said, this can be done with any shape at all. Now, this one, because I made up my own weird wonky shape, the spirals don't quite conform the same way they do in a regular shape, but it still looks really neat, and you still get the effect that this line right here looks darker because it's got lots of lines close together coming together all in one spot, and then it looks like there's a lighter gap in between, and then this line right here looks darker. These little arms, I call them the arms of the spiral, they look a little darker at the arms of the spiral. And if you want, you can even go back in and just darken that line. You don't have to do that part, but sometimes it can just increase the contrast a little bit if you do go back in and darken up those arms of the spiral. Okay, so now that we have practiced that, there's one last thing that we need to do on our practice paper before we jump to our second paper. And that is, think of a grid. So don't draw a grid yet, just start by understanding what a grid is. I have this mat here, this just to protect my table, and notice that it's got squares, right? That's a grid. It's just a bunch of squares that are all bumped up right next to each other, and you can make that kind of a grid really easy by just making lines that go one way and lines that go the other way. And there you have a grid. But there are more interesting types of grids. If you want to use a simple grid like this, that's fine. But I'm going to practice a couple of different kinds of grids, and I want you to follow along and see what kind of grids we can come up with. So let's do another grid that's simple crisscrossing lines, but this time it'll be verticals and diagonals. Huh? Okay, that's interesting. Now our shapes are diamonds instead of squares. Okay, what if I did diagonal lines going one way, diagonal lines going the other way, and horizontal lines? See how that makes like triangles in my grid? Huh. So there's lots of different ways to make a grid, and what we want to do on our second paper is make a really big grid with really big pieces of the grid, whether they're squares or triangles or diamonds, whatever that shape ends up being. We want them to be pretty big. So I don't want tiny little squares like I did on my practice page. I want really big squares. I'm going to do squares here just to keep it simple and so that everyone who wants can follow along. But I'm going to do that by making 2 lines across and 3 lines up and down. 1, 2, 3. Notice here I've got really, really big squares. I don't have any little bitty squares. Now, that little spirally pattern that we practiced a little bit ago, we're going to do that spirally pattern in every one of these squares. But first, my Sharpie is getting a little dried out, so I'm going to switch it for one that is hopefully going to work a little better. Now, when we do our spirally pattern, we want to start by picking a corner, make a line that goes to the next corner but not quite. See how this line goes all the way to the corner but doesn't quite touch it. It's just very close to it. And then to here, and then to here. And then we come back to the start, but again, not quite into the corner, a little ways away. Now, before I finish up this whole page, I want to talk a little bit about a style of art called op art. The op stands for optical illusions. So op art, here are some examples. Op art is all about creating an illusion that tricks your eyes into seeing something a different way from the way it really actually physically is. All of these use the high contrast between black lines and white background to trick your eyes, because your eyes can't focus on both the black and the white at the same time. So sometimes it looks like things shimmer, and sometimes it looks like things are three-dimensional or curved, and sometimes it looks like you can see little dots or lines that aren't actually there. So optical illusions, or op art, is where we got the inspiration for this project. Now, when you're done with one square of your grid, move on to the next and keep it consistent. Do it the same direction every time. So I'm going counterclockwise. I'm going around the wrong way from a clock. It's not, clocks go the other way. Going this way. But you can do it whichever way you want. Just keep it consistent. Keep it the same the whole way. And there you have it. That is my finished spirally op art design. Notice how these spirals, they kind of interact with the other spirals because we did this on a grid. So like if we look at just one section, the spiral that I drew went around and around and around, but then you see these four arms of the spiral But then also when you look at two sections side by side, it looks like this spirally part and this spirally part are one connected shape between the two squares of the grid. There's lots of cool little interactions that happen like that, and you can play around with flipping your spiral, so going counterclockwise, then clockwise, then counterclockwise, then clockwise, or by rotating which corner you start at. There's lots of different ways you can get different interactions where these things play really interestingly with each other. But it's a bunch of fun to make just some, simple straight lines is all I did here, but it looks like curving patterns. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed making your fun spirally little doodads today and learning a little bit about op art in the process.